I want you to imagine something terrifying. Imagine you're at your own funeral. You're floating above your body, watching everyone you've ever known gather to remember you. They're talking about your life, your achievements, your relationships, the person you were. But here's the terrifying part. Everything they're saying is about someone else. They're describing a stranger, a performance, a character you played so well that even you forgot it wasn't real. They never knew the real you because you never showed them. Hell, you're not even sure you know who the real you is anymore. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now. To millions of people. Maybe to you. We've become so good at being fake that we've forgotten how to be real. But what if I told you there was a man who cracked the code? A melancholy genius who walked the foggy streets of Copenhagen 170 years ago, wrestling with the most dangerous question ever asked, a question so powerful it could destroy your carefully constructed life, a question so liberating it could set you free. Are you ready to hear it? Who are you when nobody's performing? Who are you when the cameras are off? Who are you when the mask comes off? Who are you? Really? That man's name was Søren Kierkegaard, and he's about to ruin your comfortable lies. His name was Søren Kierkegaard, and he had a problem with everything. He had a problem with the church, not because he didn't believe in God, but because he watched people perform faith instead of living it. He had a problem with philosophy, not because he didn't think, but because he saw philosophers building beautiful theories while ignoring the messy reality of human existence. He had a problem with society, not because he hated people, but because he watched them sleepwalking through life, following scripts written by others. Kierkegaard looked around and saw something terrifying. An entire civilization of people who had forgotten how to be themselves. Sound familiar? Let me tell you about Kierkegaard's childhood, because it explains everything about why he became who he became. He was born in 1813 in Copenhagen. His father was successful, wealthy, respected. But his father carried a secret, a guilt so deep it poisoned everything. He believed his family was cursed, that some unforgivable sin would destroy them all. Most children would have been crushed by this darkness. But Kierkegaard, it made him stronger. It made him ask questions that other people were too comfortable to ask. That childhood taught him something crucial. Life isn't fair. Life isn't easy. But that doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it more meaningful. Because when life is hard, what you choose to do with it matters even more. But here's the part of Kierkegaard's story that breaks your heart. Because it's not just about philosophy. It's about love and sacrifice and the price of being true to yourself. Her name was Regine Olsen. Beautiful, intelligent. She loved Søren completely. They got engaged. For a brief moment, Kierkegaard allowed himself to dream of normal happiness, a life with someone who understood him. But then reality hit him like a freight train. Kierkegaard knew something about himself that Regine didn't know. He knew his path would be lonely. He knew his calling required everything from him. He knew that the work he had to do would consume his life, and he couldn't bear the thought of destroying her life too. So he made a choice that nearly killed him. He broke off the engagement. Imagine that. Imagine choosing your purpose over your happiness. Imagine walking away from the person you love because you love them too much to destroy them. This decision haunted him forever, but it also freed him to become exactly who he needed to become. After losing Regine, Kierkegaard threw himself into understanding human existence. And he discovered something profound. He mapped out 3 stages of life. 3 different ways of being human. Think of them as 3 different answers to the question, how should I live? The aesthetic stage. This is where most people start, and sadly, where many people stay. Life becomes about pleasure, about avoiding pain, about entertainment and distraction, and keeping yourself so busy you don't have to think about anything deep. The aesthetic person lives for the moment. They jump from experience to experience, always looking for the next high, the next thrill, the next escape from boredom. Sound like anyone you know? Maybe someone you see in the mirror? But here's the problem. It doesn't work. Eventually, the pleasure fades. The distractions lose their power, and you're left with a terrible emptiness. The ethical stage. Some people, when they hit that wall, make a different choice. They decide to live by principles, by duty, by moral rules. This is better. At least now you're taking responsibility. You're thinking about right and wrong. You're trying to be a good person. But Kierkegaard saw a problem here too. When you live purely by rules, you can become rigid, judgmental. You start thinking that following the rules makes you better than other people, and you lose touch with the mystery of existence, the religious stage. This is the highest stage, but it's also the most dangerous, because it requires something that goes against everything we've been taught. It requires a leap of faith, not faith in a particular religion, but faith in something beyond logic, beyond proof, beyond certainty. It's like Abraham on Mount Moriah, ready to sacrifice his son because God told him to. It makes no sense. It goes against everything we know about right and wrong. But sometimes you have to make choices that can't be explained. You have to trust something deeper than reason. Now here's where Kierkegaard gets really interesting. He talked about something he called the sickness unto death. But he wasn't talking about physical death. He was talking about despair. Most people think despair is the enemy, something to avoid at all costs. But Kierkegaard had a radical idea. He said despair might actually be your salvation, because despair is what happens when you finally stop lying to yourself. Think about it. When do you feel most desperate? When you're pretending to be someone you're not. When you're living a life that doesn't match who you really are. When you're going through the motions, but your soul is screaming. That despair? That's not your enemy. That's your alarm clock. It's your soul saying, wake up. You're not living. You're just existing. Kierkegaard had a deep distrust of crowds. Not because he didn't like people, but because he saw what happened when people got together in large groups. They stopped thinking for themselves. They started following leaders without questioning. They found comfort in conformity, and they lost their individuality. He wrote, "The crowd is untruth." What he meant was that truth isn't something you can vote on. It's not something you decide by consensus. Truth is personal, individual, something you have to discover for yourself. This doesn't mean you should ignore other people or live in isolation, but it does mean you can't let the crowd do your thinking for you. You have to stand alone sometimes. You have to be willing to be different. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, because the alternative is to lose yourself completely. Here's where Kierkegaard really went against the grain. The church taught that faith was communal, that you needed the church, the priests, the community to have a relationship with God. But Kierkegaard said, no, faith is personal, individual, between you and the divine. He wasn't trying to destroy religion. He was trying to save it from becoming performance art. He looked at the Danish church and saw people going through the motions, reciting creeds they didn't really believe, following rituals that had lost their meaning. And he said, this isn't faith. This is theater. Real faith happens in solitude, in silence, in the depths of your own heart. It's not something you inherit from your parents. It's not something you learn from a book. It's something you experience for yourself. If Kierkegaard were alive today, what would he think of our world? I think he'd be fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Fascinated because we have more individual freedom than any generation in history. We can choose our careers, our relationships, our beliefs, our identities, but horrified because so many of us are using that freedom to avoid making real choices. We curate our online personas instead of developing our real selves. We seek validation from strangers instead of looking inward for truth. We distract ourselves with endless entertainment instead of facing the big questions. Kierkegaard would look at social media and see the ultimate aesthetic existence: endless pleasure-seeking, constant comparison, never-ending distraction from what really matters. But he wouldn't judge us. He'd ask us, "Are you still in there? Underneath all the noise and performance and pretending? Are you still there?" Here's another radical idea from Kierkegaard. Anxiety isn't something to eliminate. It's something to embrace. Because anxiety is the feeling of freedom. When do you feel most anxious? When you're facing a big decision. When you're about to make a change. When you're stepping into the unknown. That anxiety, that's your soul recognizing that you have choices. That your life isn't predetermined. That you have the power to shape your own destiny. Most people try to avoid anxiety by avoiding choices. They stay in jobs they hate because it's safe. They stay in relationships that aren't working because it's familiar. But Kierkegaard said, lean into the anxiety. It's telling you something important. It's telling you that you're alive, that you have agency, that you matter. In a world that rewards image over substance, Kierkegaard calls us to a revolution of honesty. Be honest about your struggles. Be honest about your doubts. Be honest about your fears. Be honest about your dreams. Stop pretending you have it all figured out. Stop pretending you're perfect. Stop pretending you're someone you're not. The world doesn't need another performance. It needs your authenticity. It needs your truth. It needs you to be courageously, vulnerably, unapologetically yourself. So let me ask you the questions that Kierkegaard would ask if he were here. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you believe when it's not popular to believe it? What would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you choose if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you choose if you knew you might fail? These questions don't have easy answers. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to wake you up, to stir something in you, to start you on the journey of becoming who you're meant to be. One of the hardest parts of Kierkegaard's message is this. Sometimes being authentic means being alone. Not lonely, but alone. There's a difference. Loneliness is when you want to be with others, but can't. Aloneness is when you're comfortable with your own company. When you know who you are, you don't need constant validation from others. When you're secure in your own identity, You don't need to follow the crowd. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself. Relationships matter. Community is important. But you should engage with others from a place of strength, not weakness. From authenticity, not desperation. So here's my question for you. What is your alarm clock saying? What is that voice inside you trying to tell you? Maybe it's telling you to change careers. Maybe it's telling you to end a relationship that isn't working. Maybe it's telling you to start a relationship you've been avoiding. Maybe it's telling you to create something. Maybe it's telling you to travel. Maybe it's telling you to stay put and dig deeper where you are. Whatever it's saying, don't ignore it. Don't numb it with distractions. Don't silence it with busyness. Listen to it. Because that voice, that's not your enemy. That's your truest self trying to break through. Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." You can't wait until you have it all figured out to start living authentically. You can't wait until you're ready. You can't wait until it's convenient. You have to start now, with what you have, where you are. Because here's the truth. You'll never be completely ready. You'll never have perfect clarity. You'll never eliminate all risk. But you can start being real. You can start being honest. You can start being you. Kierkegaard died young, at 42. He was largely unknown in his lifetime. He never got to see the impact his ideas would have on the world. But he lived authentically. He asked the hard questions. He refused to settle for easy answers. He chose truth over comfort, authenticity over applause, solitude over conformity. And because he made those choices, his voice still speaks to us today. Your life might not change the world the way Kierkegaard's did, but it might change your world. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. So here we are, at the end of our journey through Kierkegaard's life and ideas. But this isn't really an ending. It's a beginning. Because now you have to decide, what are you going to do with what you've learned? Are you going to go back to sleepwalking through life? Or are you going to wake up? Are you going to keep performing? Or are you going to start being? Are you going to keep following the crowd? Or are you going to find your own path? The choice is yours. It always has been. But now you know that you have a choice, and that changes everything. Remember, you are not a passenger in your own life. You are the driver. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are the author of your story. You are not here to live someone else's dreams. You are here to discover and live your own. The question Kierkegaard asked over 150 years ago is still waiting for your answer. Who are you? Not who you pretend to be. Not who others expect you to be. Not who you think you should be. Who are you? Really? The world is waiting for your answer. But more importantly, you're waiting for your answer. So stop waiting. Start answering. Start living. Start being. The time is now. You are now. This is your moment. What are you going to do with it? Thank you.